All right, so we're going to talk about DevOps container analysis today. So I'm an engineer, new engineer at InRhythm with Arjun and Kishore working in the DevOps and cloud space as well. And kind of my vision and my work here, even today. So one thing that's really important, even if you have a meeting, anything in your life, try to take something from that meeting and deliver something. So what I want to try to deliver here is importance for cloud infrastructure, importance for containerization, importance for automation, and importance for CI/CD infrastructure as code. Specifically, I'm going to talk about container analysis now. So I will head in over to there. Just to start off with container analytics. So containers, they've been built on top of virtualization to give development, QA, and infrastructure teams, which is that core DevOps area we're looking at, right? An extraordinary technical advantage. It's a potential technical advantage, and the companies that are innovating and working on it now, I would like to see in the future are reaping benefits, but they're seeing benefits now. So if we talk about, say, 4 or 5 years ago, we might be able to say that, okay, we might be seeing that in the future. We're seeing that today. We're seeing it now. Who is utilizing this technical advantage? It's kind of what we're referring to there in that virtualization first containerization strategy. You really don't want to cling to virtualization without looking on how containerization can help your company. There are absolutely efficient ways to utilize virtualization as opposed to containerization, but it's definitely something to look towards because virtualization was new at some point as well. Industry-specific data and the roots of Docker. Industry-specific data, specifically in the DevOps field, there's a huge area Arjun and I, and then Kishore and upwards to Manoj have tried to highlight. So use industry-specific data in the DevOps field when you're picking solutions that you want, right? So if you want to use Puppet or you want to use Chef for your infrastructure as code tool, make sure that it's supported. So 2017 State of the Cloud report, it's endorsed by Forbes. I encourage everybody to look at it. Again, 2017 State of the Cloud report gives you top analysis and research because once you start using a tool as a team, you only have so many times to innovate. So that's really important. And so moving on to Docker offerings, the core. I've had the ability to work directly with Docker. This is going to be, I think we're actually still working on it here, but this will be my third time being able to either partner or work along with Docker. The lightning takeaway number one, define the Docker offering. So a lot of people just talk about Docker like, oh, Docker's really great. We should use Docker. We should definitely switch over to Docker for this or that. One thing to take away from this talk. So this lightning takeaway one, please define the Docker offering you're talking about. So we have all of these different offerings, right? We have Docker Cloud, Docker Compose, Docker Engine, Docker Machine, Docker Swarm, Docker Trusted Registry, Docker Universal Control Plane. They're all different areas. Most people, when they're talking about core Docker, you're talking about the Docker engine, but it's always good to be specific, especially in our industry, so that developers and infrastructure engineers, QA, we can all move forward and collaborate on that. Takeaway number two is that this Docker engine is the fundamental core of our new containerization world. So we're going to see, I highlighted Docker Swarm in red, because moving forward with Docker Swarm, a lot of people like to then link Docker and Kubernetes. So we're innovating with Docker and Kubernetes this month, or for Q1, Q2, we're innovating with Docker Kubernetes. What does that mean? So basically in that area, we're talking about container orchestration. So for container orchestration, Kishore actually wasn't here today. Kishore has worked specifically in the Kubernetes area, and I've worked in the Docker Swarm area. But the takeaway from our container orchestration is now that we have the core Docker engine to build upon, Kubernetes is now a subset of these that would fit in right here with Docker Swarm. So Kubernetes would lie here. If you have somebody really strong from Kubernetes or somebody from Google, they might tell you otherwise that they have other services, and they do. But for the most part, that orchestration of containers and how we not only use individual containers but orchestrate them for full stack applications, that's what we're talking about in that area. Some key differences between Docker Swarm and Kubernetes. In a Docker Swarm, a typical Docker company supported swarm is going to be 3 manager nodes and 6 worker nodes. So you have 3 points of failure there. And then specifically the containers and how they're allocated among the hosts, they're done individually. So that's definitely a takeaway you could have is in a Docker swarm, they're allocated individually, whereas opposed to Kubernetes, which is made up of, I don't know if anybody's familiar with maybe a salt stack or an Ansible, but it has a master and worker configuration. So basically it has a kubelet, what's called a kubelet running on each of the hosts that are then communicating with specifically the Kubernetes master API. And the way that the construction is done on the orchestration there is not per individual container, but per pod. So for the pods are defined in a YAML file, similar to Docker Compose, which was also written in YAML, which is then fed into the configuration to the master node to spread along in the kubelet processes for each of those specific worker nodes. And the core difference is the Docker pods are groups of containers that share the same IP address. So they share that same network namespace and IP address as opposed to just a single Docker container. Kubernetes has built on the Docker container engine, so it's using that Docker engine, also known as the Docker runtime. The big takeaway here is just a fun takeaway. Docker Swarm versus Kubernetes battle, it rages on. Kubernetes, very open source, Google-esque, and Docker Swarm recently in March 2017 had the Community Edition versus Enterprise Edition split, which has really shocked the world, especially for people that are running Red Hat distributions, specifically Red Hat 7. So I'm going to do a jump back here, do some, I believe, okay, I think I'm missing one slide, and that's okay. All right, so the next piece was, I actually didn't even do the title here, so it's a new slide anyway. So basically the last piece was Red Hat OpenShift. So basically when we're then taking, now we have the core Docker engine, right? So we have our container, right? And now we're orchestrating containers. We're able to orchestrate containers and applications. So now from development, we're digging towards the infrastructure side. Now how do we actually do that in a process that is monitored, where there's security on it, and where there's automation available to be able to deploy our GitHub repositories into Docker images to then be deployed as containers easily. And that's a great tool that Red Hat OpenShift is offering. Specifically, OpenShift Origin is an open source project that is allowing a lot of our developers, infrastructure specialists, QA engineers to be able to contribute into. And that's one similarity that definitely spreads across the board from Docker to Kubernetes to Red Hat OpenShift is embracing that open source community. It's huge with the DevOps and the DevOps culture. So just a lightning recap talk here. Containerization. What can you all do in the world to push forward containerization? Do you believe it? Do you not believe it? Do you think that there's questions about why it can't help over virtualization? I encourage you all to look into those things, research those things. Look at the 2017 State of the Cloud report. Read data, understand data. Look at zeros and ones because sometimes when you look at unfiltered opinions, even mine or anybody, a developer, infrastructure engineer, we're not always correct because we're rapidly moving. And the other pieces is just some contact information, and that's it. That's my talk, and thank you.